Now that all the kids have gorged themselves on chocolate and are bouncing off the walls, it's time to grab your UV torches and talk about glowing wrist candy. Welcome to Lume-O-Ween 2023. Regular viewers know what they got into when they clicked on this, but for you newcomers, this is my annual tradition where I look back at the best watches I got to see this year for Lume. The brightest, the longest lasting, and sometimes the most creative. And I gotta say, this year was a fantastic year for Lume, as this is the year that most brands just seemed to get it when it came to Lume. As I not only discovered a couple more kings of Lume, but most of the watches I ran across had good, if not great Lume. Plus, a number just went above and beyond with some crazy fantastic designs. But let's get to it. And coming in at number 5 is the RZE Ascentus GMT. And forewarning, there are a lot of GMTs on this list, as that's one of the things that was hot this year. But the RZE Ascentus is my favorite NH34 based GMT. After getting it, I took a few trips with it, and I gotta say it was a joy to travel with. It's an original tooly design paired with a comfortable and hardened titanium case. It's incredibly lightweight, and RZE designed a great bracelet to go with it. Normally, I'm not a big fan on rough textured dials, but there's just something here with this blue and this all blasted case that I really like. But best of all, RZE didn't skimp on the lume. So good lume and the fantastic use of blue BGW9 and green C3 Superluminova, just to create a great looking and highly functional design, where you have all the regular time elements in green and the GMT components isolated in blue, making it very easy to use at night as well as pretty eye-catching. Now, I did see quite a few watches that had better or longer lasting lume than the Ascentus, but it's the combination it used of having good lume and good design work that solidified its place here. The competition this year was pretty stiff, and that's a good thing, but it was so stiff that I had a hard time really deciding how to rank some of these, and I just decided to call a couple of them a tie. So with that in mind, at number 4, we have both the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT and the Wise Watches Adamascus 8760. Both great go anywhere, do anything kinds of watches, as well as ones with pretty long names. With divers and dive style GMTs, you expect great lume. But when it comes to sports watches, that's not always the case, which is where these two come in, as these two fairly versatile pieces can outlast most divers out there. They're great and well made, albeit with pretty different styles, with the C63 ready to travel the globe as an Explorer 2 alternative, while the 8760 has a little bit more of an Aqua Terra vibe, one that's been blended with a Damascus steel case. The C63 has a beautiful, casual, clean design, with a crisp white dial and sharply defined indices, while the 8760 comes off as something a bit more exotic thanks to its Damascus case, all while the blue dial is a true looker. Either way, these are two watches that are pretty sharp whether lights are on or off. Now, while those watches had pretty standard designs, this next one does not. So at number 3, get ready for the best creative, if not pretty quirky use of lume I've ever seen, with the Revelot G10 Admiral GMT. I mean, just look at it. This thing is nuts. The idea behind it is that this watch was inspired by some of the newer naval combat ships. And as such, the dial here is supposed to look like a radar screen. And I think it succeeds, although this NH4 based GMT is just as unusual during the day, with its multi-layered textured dial and hands that resemble those same combat ships. It's got presence, to say the least, and overall fairly comfortable with its mini samurai-ish cushiony case. It's not exactly the most subtle watch in the world, and especially at night, but it is cool and funky. And the craziest thing about it is that it has pretty good lume. Most novelty designs are just that, but this is just as functional as it is funky, making this truly one for the lume nuts out there. Coming in at number 2, we have another tie, but they're both from Phoibos, so you can just kind of say it's a win for them. And that's with the Vortex and the Great Wall 2. Now the Vortex here is pretty odd, to say the least. And for Phoibos, that's really saying something. It's sort of this compressor style tuna, with a funky and potentially flawed dial design. I go into more detail in the actual review of that. However, one thing it does do well is its lume. It's on point, as not only is it a great looking design, but it's the third best Phoibi I've ever seen for lume, sitting right behind the other two Great Walls, and that's still saying something. And as for the Great Wall 2, it's a good looking sharp watch, a more normalized version from the first Great Wall, the original King of Lume, where they took that cult hit and all the criticism that was thrown at it, and then proceeded to dial down the crazy a bit. So gone is the brick textured dial, the vibrant plow profish hands, and bulbous sapphire bezel, all eliminated in an effort to make it more accessible, more normal, albeit with still an original unusual design. And while many can argue that it's not as good as the original, one thing they did get right is that lume, with 15 layers of grade A superluminova spread throughout, making this a true king of lume in its own right. Now, as is tradition, before we get to number 1, I do have a couple of honorable mentions. Up first, the Kigai Maru. Last year I reviewed the prototype. It had a great unusual design, which included some Tron-like lume sidewalls. But the problem is that it just didn't have any staying power. I believe my exact quote was that it needed Viagra. However, the production units have shipped and they have upped the lume quite a bit here, now to be on par with most Seikos. And with this design, that's something worth noting. And second is the Casio Oceanus S5000. Along the same lines as the C63 and the Wise 8760, this is a sports watch that can beat out many divers, but the lume isn't quite as good as those two. In fact, there are quite a few watches I saw this year that had better lume than it. But for what it is, a slender wonder of Japanese ingenuity and craftsmanship, the lume is surprisingly good. And I also want to briefly mention the new Jack Mason collaboration with Dr. Pepper. It's pretty much the regular Strata timer, but they did use lume to hide a pretty cool Dr. Pepper Easter egg inside it. And lastly, I got a dishonorable mention with Orient. Not a specific watch, but Orient in general. Because for a while, Orient seemed to have their lume dialed in. The Kamasu is not only one of the best value watches out there, but it has some of the best lume for the price. And then you have the Orient Star Diver, another true king of lume. But with this year, the Mako 3, the 40mm Mako, and the overpriced Orient Star 1964, lume's just been a disappointment all around. So Orient, we know you can do better. Now, with that said, let's get to the top watch this year. And sitting at number 1 is the fully lumed Wise Hitman. Now, I haven't done a full review on it just yet, so I am kind of bending the rules here. But I recently did a video checking out the lume, and the lume here is insane. Many thought the Signum Cudas were going to be the end-all to be-all when it came to lume, especially fully lumed watches. But this Wise Hitman takes that a step further, which in some ways isn't surprising because Wise has some great lume, with their 8760 from this year and their 88 diver, which is also a king of lume. But this one, the Hitman Hit 66 fully lumed, is just nuts. And it's not just the fully lumed part, which is amazing in itself. I mean, this dial just keeps glowing and glowing, but the hands are right along with that. One of the reasons I started calling all the best watches Kings of Lume was that they were so close in performance, it was just hard to say which one was truly better than any of the others. But this one, this is pretty clear cut. Best lume I've ever seen. So it's not just a king of lume, but perhaps the emperor of lume. And if you haven't seen the lume off video against the Signum, go check it out. And also check out Dave's full review of it if you're still interested. And if you hadn't noticed, I'm actually wearing it right now. But with that, LUMEOWEEN 2023 comes to a close. Now, as always, let me know what you think about all of this, the watches, the lume, which one's your favorite, and what's your best watch for LUMEOWEEN this year. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell button, do something down below. Really helps the channel. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.